Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the August BOA meeting. We're waiting for one more board member. If we don't hear from here soon, we'll get started, but I see Ms. Skurlock has joined us, so we'll be getting started here in just a few minutes. Thanks.
The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is hereby called to order for its regularly scheduled meeting of August 23rd, 2023. My name is Tim Rainey. I'm chairman of the board. Mr. Brett Ragsdale serves as secretary of the board. Mr. Ragsdale, may I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Baker?
Here.
Mr. Bruce?
Present.
Mr. Campbell?
Present.
Mr. Claybrook?
Here.
Ms. Skurlock?
Here.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Present.
Chair Rainey?
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right. Thank you. The Memphis and Shelby County Board of Adjustment is the oldest appointed governmental body in Memphis and Shelby County. We were established in 1925. The board hears appeals from the administration of the zoning ordinance, requests for variances from the zoning ordinance, and other requests as articulated by local zoning laws adopted pursuant to the enabling legislation. The 8 members of the board are appointed, 4 by the mayor of Memphis and 4 by the mayor of Shelby County, with confirmation by the Memphis City Council or Shelby County Board of Commissioners. We serve without remuneration. At this time, I'd like to swear in the staff. You may remain seated. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? All right, thank you. May I get a motion to approve the minutes from last month's meeting?
So move.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? All right, if there's no discussion, all those in favor of approving the minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Mr. Secretary, could you provide a secretary's report, if there is one this month, and then explain the procedure for today's meeting?
Yes, sir. The one thing I did want to note is I like to try to introduce any new staff members that you might see their names on reports. And we have another intern that joined us just for a short period of time who's actually interning with with Mayor Harris's administration. And his name is Justin Harris. I don't think any relation, but he did one of our cases for us this month, which was very helpful. And he's going back to school at the end of this month, so won't be joining us after that for a little while, but we appreciated his help with that. So,
Oh, very good.
yeah. And so I'll go into the procedures. The procedure for this meeting will be as follows. I will introduce each case as listed on the agenda. Copies of the agenda are found in the front right podium. For each case, the planner with the Division of Planning and Development will give a presentation. Following the staff presentation, the applicant will present his or her case. After the applicant's presentation, the board will hear first from those speakers in support of the application, then from those speakers in opposition to the application, and then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to provide rebuttal. All parties who wish to provide testimony to the board will be sworn in by the chair. If a member of the audience wishes to provide testimony in support of or in opposition to a particular case on today's agenda, he or she will need to fill out speaker's cards for the record. Speaker's cards are available at the front podium. Once filled out, speaker's cards can be submitted to any DPD planner at the left podium. We do not need speaker's cards from the applicants since their names are already part of the record. After all parties have been heard, the board will close the public hearing, make a motion, and then deliberate on the case. Pursuant to the board's rules of procedure, the time allotted for speakers will be as follows. The applicant has 5 minutes to present his or her case. The applicant may reserve unused time for his or her rebuttal. Those speaking in support of the application have 5 minutes. This 5 minutes is the total time allotted for support testimony, regardless of the number of speakers. Those speaking in opposition of the application have 10 minutes. This 10 minutes is the total time allotted for opposition testimony, regardless of the number of speakers. The applicant has 2 minutes for rebuttal in addition to any unused time from his or her presentation time. These times do not include time for questions from and answers to members of the board. The chair may provide additional time provided both sides are given an equal amount of additional time. If the applicant or any speaker would like to be heard after the conclusion of the public hearing, or if a board member wishes to hear additional testimony from any party, a 2/3 vote is required to reopen the public hearing pursuant to the board's rules of procedure. Please note that once the public hearing is reopened, both the applicant and opposition will be allowed to provide additional testimony and/or rebuttal. All motions made by this board will be made in the affirmative. The private acts governing the board require the affirmative vote of at least 5 members to approve an application, regardless of the number of board members present. The board may also vote to hold an application for a period not to exceed 90 days with the consent of the applicant or 30 days without the consent of the applicant. All section numbers that we refer to come from the Memphis and Shelby County Unified Development Code, or the UDC, which was adopted by the Memphis City Council and Shelby County Board of Commissioners in August of 2010 and became effective on January 1st of 2011. I will introduce the entire UDC and make it part of today's record, thus dispensing with the reading of individual sections. The board is vested with the power to act on these cases before us today under the provisions of Chapter 9.22 of the UDC. Mr. Chairman, I submit that all cases have been filed in proper order, all applicants have been notified of this hearing, and all notice requirements have been fulfilled as required by the UDC.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. At this point, the board will establish its consent agenda. To establish the consent agenda, the Secretary will call out each eligible case. If any member of the audience, staff, or board member objects to a case being placed on the consent agenda, he or she should make their objection known by a show of hands when the Secretary reads the case or have already turned in a speaker's card. Once the consent agenda is established, the board will vote on all cases placed on the consent agenda as a whole and will not hold individual public hearings on each case. Mr. Secretary, which items on our agenda are eligible to be placed on consent this week?
Item number 2, BOA 2023-085, the parcel to the east of 500 East Pontotoc Avenue as a 1-month hold. Item number 4, BOA 2023-089, 1637 Britton Street as a 1-month hold. Item number 5, BOA 2023-091, 1800 Berry Hill Road. Item number 6, BOA 2023-092, 900 North Sanger Road. Item number 7, BOA 2023-093, 433 Waldron Boulevard as a 1-month hold. Item number 8, BOA 2023-094, 1098 Florida Street. Item number 9, BOA 2023-096, near Northborough Cemetery Road. Item number 10, BOA 2023-097, 570 North Rivergate Road. Item number 11, BOA 2023-098, 4730 Pleasant Run Road and 4949 Lamar Avenue. Item number 12, BOA 2023-099, 1348 Mississippi Boulevard. Item number 13, BOA 2023-100, 451 Tillman Street. Item number 14, BOA 2023-101, 3480 Plaza Avenue. Item number 15, BOA 2023-102, 3920 Ridgeway Road. And item number 16, BOA 2023-103, 1542 Elvis Presley Boulevard as a 1-month hold.
Okay, quick question. And you did say 5 was a hold?
5 is approval.
Approval, okay. All right, so to be clear, the only case that's not on the consent agenda is number 3.
Correct, and I should have noted number 1 was withdrawn. So.
Number 1 was withdrawn, yeah.
Yes, number 3 is the only one that was.
Okay. All right. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as established by the secretary, which is item 2 as a hold, 4 as a hold, 5 and 6 as approval with conditions, 7 as a hold, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 as a hold. And do we have a card come in?
We have a card for number 14, so that will be.
So 14 would not be on consent.
So moved.
Second.
I'd like to remind you that the board, by voting on the consent agenda, he or she affirms that he or she has read the staff report and is in full agreement with the conditions. Mr. Secretary, may I get a roll call, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Scurlock?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go ahead and finish this vote, and then we can.
Okay, sure.
remove some. Okay. Mr. Bruce, Mr. Campbell, Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Yes, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met and will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Mr. Claver?
Yes.
And Chair Rainey?
Yes.
Okay, that motion carries.
And then, did we have a card come in?
Okay, number 7,
There was supposed to be a hold.
that was a hold. So we keep that as a hold. That's it, so.
Right, okay. All right. All right, so if you're here for cases 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15, or 16, they've all been either held as requested. And a note on if the applicant asks for a hold, then we will give them a hold on the first shot. So that's why 7, if there's opposition here, we're going to allow that hold no matter what. But they've either been held or approved as conditioned by staff as requested. And so, Mr. Secretary, can we hear the first case we're going to actually hear today, or will you call it, please?
Yes, sir. Item number 3, BOA 2023-070, 837 Florida Street.
All right. If the applicant's present, if they'll come to the front. Perfect. And if the opposition will come to the front as well. And Mr. Davis, could you give us a staff report, please?
Yes, sir. Brett Davis with Planning and Development. Give me one moment. All right, this is case BOA 2023-70. Just some background information. This case, a very similar case to this one, was filed in 2022 and was held at the applicant's request the maximum number of times and then withdrawn. And this case was then refiled as is today. The location is 837 Florida. The owner and applicant are Florida Street, represented by Mr. Benke today. Before that case that I just mentioned last year, there was another case dating to 2019, and this is concerning a convenience store with gas pumps at the corner of Crump and Florida Street, the northwest corner. This board granted a few variances for that development, not a use variance. The use is permitted by right in this district, the Gateway Commercial District, which is a south downtown only zoning district. The main variance requested at that time was to allow parking between the building and the street, which is generally not allowed in the Gateway Commercial Zoning District. That was approved, and a site plan was approved. Building permits were filed, and the site was built in non-compliance with the approved site plan, which was eventually brought to our attention, and the development, the construction, was given a stop work order of sorts. And construction has, since that time, mostly totally ceased. There are several issues with the site as built out that we could not approve to the site plan, those changes to the site plan administratively, because they were in further non-compliance with the UDC than what had been granted through the variance process by the board. And I've identified what those additional variances needed are here on this slide. So there are three, and there's also a request to modify one of the conditions of approval from that 2021 case. I said 2019. There was a case in 2019. It came back in 2021. That's the one with the approved site plan. So let me just go over those real quick. The first is a variance from item 2.6.3J1B to allow a pump island within 20 feet of a property line. So the UDC requires a 20-foot setback from any property line for a pump island. The same goes for a pump itself. Item 2.6.3J2A to allow a fuel canopy within 10 feet of a property line. Again, the UDC has a 10-foot setback for the canopy itself from any property line. So those have been built encroaching. Those are already there. And sub-item 7.2.7E1B to allow a principal structure encroachment into the minimum 10-foot side setback. So the first two are convenience store with gas pump use standards, and then the third is a setback from the Gateway Commercial District for the principal structure. So all three of those have been built encroaching into their relevant setbacks from these sections. Finally, one of the conditions of approval from 2021 that the board imposed was a minimum 10-foot sidewalk as part of a minimum 15-foot streetscape plate. And that 15-foot streetscape plate was actually one of the variances granted. This zoning district requires a 30-foot streetscape plate. So in addition to the parking between the building and the street, a reduction in that streetscape plate was approved as well. And so the request is to reduce, not change the minimum width of the streetscape plate as approved by the board through the variance, but to reduce that minimum sidewalk width from 10 feet to 6 feet. The 15-foot streetscape plate minimum would remain. There are some other aspects of the site that have been built that are in non-compliance, including a dumpster enclosure too close to the property line that have not been asked to be approved through this current application, and those would be ameliorated if this is approved as recommended with our conditions. So let's take a look at some exhibits. Here is a map showing where the site is located in South Downtown, and a zoning map. So, of course, the red lines are zoning district boundaries. Here we see the gateway commercial. So along Crump, generally speaking, is gateway commercial zoning. However, to the east and northwest of the site is the Bluffview residential district. So there is residential zoning immediately in the vicinity. And the zoning map reflects that to a degree. Purple is industrial. So most of these industrial uses are non-conforming. When we adopted our South Downtown zoning districts, a major purpose of that was to phase out industrial, but a lot of them are legal non-conforming uses. You can't see it so well on the screen, but just to the north of the site, this is brown, and to the east of the site, this is brown as well. And that is multifamily brown, and those are in that Bluffview residential zoning district. All right. So just some images of the site. Here is what has been built, seen from Crump. So again, the encroachments here are on the left side of this image. The principal structure, which is a 10-foot setback, the canopy, which is a 10-foot setback, and then the pump itself, which the underground infrastructure has already been installed, and that's a 20-foot setback from the property line. There is an alley right-of-way that to the west of the site, and we'll see that on the site plan in just a moment. Here's the rear of the site, so a landscape buffer will be required to the rear. And you can also see the dumpster enclosure that has been built, and as recommended by staff, this would need to be rebuilt in the proper location, just a bit further from the property line. Here's a view east down Crump, the current sidewalk, and a view south down Florida. So here is the applicant's site plan, which was developed working with staff. So we are recommending approval of those 4 requests. So there will be a 4-foot landscape strip and 6-foot sidewalk with landscaping on the other side of the sidewalk. You can see this curb here, so that would be a landscaped area. So it still meets that 15-foot minimum approved via variance by the board. But instead of a 10-foot sidewalk, it's going to be a 4-foot long, 6-foot sidewalk. Okay, here's this alley we mentioned. This is another change from the site plan that had been approved. This is a right-of-way, and there's development, multifamily apartment development that's been proposed to the west. So north is to the right on this site plan. That will also be making use of this alley. It's been designed as a one-way alley that you would enter off Virginia and could come in to the gas station site through that alley. From Crump, there will be 2-way access. So you could turn in off Crump and enter the gas station site, but not enter the alley itself. Just to complicate things a little bit, there is some what I'm calling no man's land between the alley right-of-way, which you can see here. It's a 12.5-foot right-of-way, and the property line that does not appear to be right-of-way or within this property. So we're not sure exactly how that got there, but this land was platted a long time ago, and that is proposed to be landscaped. So the alley would be a 12.5-foot alley with some curbed landscaping between the vehicular area of the convenience store and the right-of-way itself. And that would be to the side of the building and these pumps, and would only have brakes to allow for vehicular movement. Some other changes from the site plan that was approved, which we see here. So this is the approved site plan that the site was not built in exact conformance with. There were 6 pumps proposed. That's gone down to 3. Now they're of course closer to that right of way than was approved. The orientation of the building has changed, and this old site plan did not have the same alley design that we see today. All right. So that's most of my presentation. I can go over the site plan in more detail with y'all if you'd like. Those 3 additional variances, as well as the change to that condition, have been requested. As we can see, construction has begun. And we are supporting these requests as built and as requested. And we're just noting the plan that we've worked on to improve the alley rather than have a fully private curb cut to the site. And that concludes my presentation. We are recommending approval subject to these 7 conditions. And I know I just said my presentation was over, but just to go over it real quickly, we are requiring the curb landscaping, not allowing signage on the canopy on any side, keeping that minimum streetscape width of 15 feet total, making sure that the code's requirements of bicycle parking, accessible parking, pedestrian facilities, landscape buffer to the north, and code compliant dumpster screening are going to be maintained, and to resubmit a site plan subject to staff approval in accordance with any variances that have or will be approved and these conditions. And we note that all the conditions from the 2021 variance do remain in effect. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, go for it.
Mr. Davis, is there a billboard on this site?
Yeah, so it's not, I did not include that photo. There is a junior billboard that appears to be in the right-of-way, but not
Will it
on
be
this.
removed as part of this development?
It would need to be removed to allow for the pavement as shown in the site plan, yes, ma'am.
Okay, can we add that as a condition possibly? I guess I'm getting too far along, but we'll talk about that later.
All right, I got a couple. Go back to the dumpster. You're saying like that's not part of this, so that'll have to be rectified?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So as built, it's too close to the property line. That is not one of the variances that has been requested, though.
Okay. And then go back to your site plan real quick that had the green on it. Second. The very westernmost at the top of that, what's that strip to the far side of the alley?
So this is not actually part of the site plan. This is more conceptual, this green here.
Okay.
It actually says, I'm trying to zoom in, West Alley, boundary line, landscaping treatment, TBD. That's what that says there.
Okay.
And that would be determined as part of the site plan approval for the multifamily development that is under review right now to the west.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions of staff? All right, if the applicant can come forward.
John Benke, 1164 Brookfield, Memphis.
Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead and share with us.
Chairman Rainey, members of the board, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present our application today. My remarks will be brief and request that the balance of my time be reserved if needed. We concur with the staff report. The site plan before you is at the recommendation of the Department of Planning and Development and is the result of a collaborative and coordinated effort over many months. We agree to the conditions. Is the site plan perfect? No. Is it satisfactory? Yes. There are several positive additions to the site plan that weren't part of the 2 previous unanimous approvals of this body. We have crews on standby to finish the construction, which is estimated to be better than 90% completed. The plan before you creates an exit ramp. So we ask for and will very much appreciate your approval. Thank you.
Okay, we reserved quite a lot of time. Is there anybody else here in speaking in favor of this? All right, then we're going to move to the opposition. I got 2 cards. Does somebody want us to speak first? You want me to call a name? Mr. Little? Okay, go ahead and come up. And you'll give your name and address for the record. Sure.
James Little, 2580 McAdoo Avenue, Memphis, Tennessee.
Okay, and do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I want to thank everybody for their time this afternoon and reviewing what we have in front of us today. So we've been trying to work on a solution that is really proactive in urban planning, and we have ended at something that we don't feel is sufficient. Up on the screen here, we actually have a drawing that we have marked up that has various issues that we have with the site plan. The landscape buffer requirements required for fuel stores should be adhered to per the UDC. Annotating on here, the adjacent developments landscape buffer should not be a part of this process. And it should not be utilized to fix their issues that they have developed today, regardless of how they got there. We've got a canopy and a pump setback that has been encroached upon. Those are 10 feet and 12 feet per the UDC, and they're not currently that now. This purple line here is what is shown to be the property line. So we're proposing that we're supposed to fix this landscape buffer issue by putting landscaping in the public right-of-way. Also, on item number 2 here that you can see, IFC, International Fire Code, states that you're supposed to have pumps no less than 10 feet from the property line. We believe these to be less than 10 feet from the property line. Item number 3, in this landscape barrier that is abutting Florida and Crump, we don't see any landscaping in this. Is that actually going to get installed as a part of construction? We're not really sure, but this seems to be a substantial deviation from what was approved in 2021. Item number 4, the landscaping further to Crump in Florida and Green. This doesn't really conform to any streetscape standards and is not really something that I think would be maintained if installed. Our main goal is to have something built here that is aesthetically pleasing, walkable, and makes this area look much better. We don't have a PE stamp from their designer that put this together. We've got a lot of questions on why that's missing. We've got conflicting notes here with existing curb cut and site planting that's proposed. And we also don't see any notes about the missing 6-foot brick wall required in the March 21st, 2021 BOA application and conditional improvements. Just so everybody's aware, these are the UDC sections that we're in violation of. We would ask for them to adhere to all of these. Here's the IFC sections that we believe that they're in violation of with respect to pump locations to property lines and maintenance of them. I can zoom in here if you guys want to see this a little bit better. It was also noted that the public notice that was sent out, we had comments in prior to the expiration date of that public notice, and they were not included because they sent out the wrong notice. So we really had sent everything in based on what was required of us, and it was not included in the staff report for whatever reason. Here's some other conditions that were required from the previous BOA application that are highlighted. We don't see any of these really annotated on this plan, which is quite frankly unacceptable. It's also noted that the amount of frontage on Crump is insufficient for access on Crump. The existing alley is not an acceptable alternative for access to the proposed gas station. We have multifamily apartments that are proposed next door, and we're basically utilizing an alleyway for their means of ingress and egress. I don't see this as being something that's pedestrian friendly, nor do I think many other people would, when there's not really a clear path for cars to enter and exit. We have an existing gas station on Poplar. That's a 2-pump station that's got a site that's actually substantially less than what we have at the corner of Crump in Florida. So when you look at this, this was built in compliance with setback requirements. So it can be done. And just so everybody's aware, these are the landscape buffer requirements for Class 3 buffers, which are required abutting up to residential. I didn't see that annotated on the drawings. This is an exhibit here showing what was originally proposed and is now missing from a shrubbery landscape perspective on this project. And this is what we've been planning all along here, directly to the west. I ask that everybody please be highly cognizant of their decision today. The state of Tennessee is investing $150 million in interchange that's going to create a new gateway into Memphis on Crumpin Avenue. I don't think it's super smart urban planning to approve what we have in front of us today, given this new opportunity for Memphis and a gateway.
Good afternoon, Attorney Andrew Horvath from Spence Partners Law Firm, counsel for Mr. Little.
Okay, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Although Mr. Little has briefly covered most of the substantive concerns that are already present with regard to the proposed application as it's been now refiled, I want to emphasize very briefly a couple of things from my perspective, trying to protect our client's interest. For due process purposes, although the comments did not make it in for the staff report on account of a notice error, I do hope that the board will give due credence to what he's presented here today and allow this to be his meaningful opportunity to be heard by all the members of the panel. And secondarily, what he has not taken significant time to share is that if approved at this point, the application and the site itself would have a profound impact on his own planned development immediately abutting this land, where it would significantly decrease the area which he could build the site, the residential site that he is planning. It's a profound economic impact on him, and for safety purposes, that side alley needs to allow a certain minimum amount of space, particularly for fire and first responders, that ultimately the cost would be pushed back onto Mr. Little and his development when he's not the one that has acted contrary to any of the requirements of the UDC. And so that would cause not only significant economic, but I would propose also immediate irreparable harm to his development. And we'd ask that the board take into consideration that very serious implication if the site is approved retroactively despite its non-compliance with the UDC. In particular, I'll emphasize the safety concerns related to the alley with regard to the overhang of the canopy and the gas pump. And although all of the proposed applications site as it stands now is not compliant, I think those deserve a special scrutiny by the board, and appreciate everyone's time and consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for your time this afternoon in reviewing this.
Any questions for Mr. Little or his counsel? I had a quick question about, I know your site plan's not done or anything. So do you show, how do you enter and exit that parking lot? Is it two-way traffic on the alley?
This site plan had assumed two-way traffic in and out of the alleyway.
And how wide is that alley again?
We're not 100% sure because we have conflicting site plans and surveys, but we believe it's proposed to be 12 and a half feet.
That big enough for two-way traffic?
Not necessarily.
Okay. And then what's your setback? Your building setbacks are what, 5 feet maybe? I mean, and I know you're not done.
Yeah, 5 feet on the side. As of John, right now, I believe we've got that design, but yes, 5 feet on the side.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, can you elaborate a little bit about the economic impact? You said it'll have significant economic impact on your property. Can you help me out a little bit there?
Absolutely. This building right here on the south side facing Crump will likely not get built if these variances and these things are approved. It's just too close. We don't have access to commercial. We had a commercial tenant planned for the downstairs. They don't really have access. The building is going to be going away.
Okay.
Could you explain that more? I'm just, your building's closer to the line than the canopy. So how would that impede your ingress and egress? I'm just trying to understand.
Well, the alley right now, according to the plan, is proposed to only be southbound.
Okay.
So we would then have to have an easement access agreement for commercial, but in reality, the canopy and the pump is so close that we don't really have an effective way to get commercial tenants in and out, given where it sits now.
Because they would have to drive on the gas station
I mean,
property
it's
to get in
on the
and
gas
out.
station property, it's all super close and tight. I mean, we've ended up
But is it any
moving
tighter
this
than,
access.
But I guess I don't understand, is it any tighter than your building?
Pardon?
I know we have two site plans, so I'm trying to
Yeah.
put them together. The gas station canopy is like 6 or 7 feet from the alley.
It's like, I think it's closer to 6, about like 3 feet, 3 feet and some change, I believe.
Is that,
I can pull that dimension up here.
yeah,
I think it's
you
on
can,
here.
I have this in front of me and it's so small, I can't hardly see anyway, much less that.
So the edge of this curb
Yeah.
right here to the alley is less than 10 feet. I would
Gotcha.
say it's probably 9 and some change based on what we're seeing.
Perfect.
And so
And the
this
canopy's
canopy
even
is
closer.
almost 3 feet and some change.
That's very helpful. And then can you zoom in, above, just close to right where you were? How wide is that showing the alley in that really thin spot?
It's showing this to be 12 and a half feet right here. This
Okay.
dimension is 12 and a half feet.
Between the, okay.
And that's another thing that we don't really know how wide the alley really is. There's differences in surveys. The survey doesn't have a PE stamp on it. Nobody's been able to truly ascertain the width.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. That was very helpful. Any other questions for the opposition? Or Mr. Little? All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank everybody so much for your time this afternoon.
Yeah. Ms. Karkoff? We have about 2 minutes left. If that's
Hi, I'm Amelia Karkoff, and I live at 60 Virginia Avenue, just behind this site. I also represent Parachute Investment Company, which is also a stakeholder in this area at 80 Virginia Avenue
Okay.
with National Rose Company.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so
I
help you
do.
God? All right, go ahead.
I am here primarily, I would like to see both of these developments occur. I've been at the Board of Adjustment meetings previously for the convenience store. We left those meetings with an understanding of how, what variances would take place, some of which I do not see in this new site plan. One of those things is the 15-foot landscape barrier on Crump in Florida, bermed so as to mask or screen the car headlights from the existing residential properties that are currently Crescent Bluff across from Florida. I want to see those things back in, and this confuses me. I'm here somewhat out of confusion when I see the smaller sidewalk, the grass, and then a landscape barrier. I just don't want to see that bermed landscape get away from us. There were a couple of other things in that, in previous Board of Adjustment variances that I don't see represented here, and I want to ensure that those are included. One of those was a bike fix-it station. I think it's important as a continuation of the downtown walking neighborhood into this boundary at Crump Avenue. This is a gateway commercial district. I think it needs to embrace the walking community. And so I want to make sure those things don't disappear. I also want to indicate that it is important that this thing gets open. It's empty. It's, I don't know, almost complete. It was not built correctly, but it needs to get open because it's encouraging theft, vandalism, all of those things are happening, and that's the opposite of what we're trying to do on Crump Avenue. So with that said, I'll sit.
Are there any questions for Ms. Karkoff? All right, thank you. Is there anybody else here in opposition? right, we'll move back to the rebuttal. And I think we have 11 minutes. Is that right, Vice Chair? All right, go ahead.
Well, let's see. For Ms. Karkuff, we will absolutely be doing the berming. That's always been in the plan. And we will even give her a look at that before we do that. But that will be done when we, if we get approval, then we will make sure that that is included with the planning department. We'll also definitely have a bike rack and a bike repair station. We want that there. It's good for business, so we will absolutely do that. So in this process, our GC goofed, and although we reduced the pumps from 6 to 3, when they built it, they mismeasured, and the pump and the canopy were placed where they are now. And the heck of it is, we have plenty of room to come east to do this. They just made a mistake. Having said that, the canopy and the pump are 100% on this property. In addition, there is, depending upon who you're talking to, there's 12 to 18 feet before you get to the neighbor's property. So it is totally contained on the property, and that's why we're asking for the variance, because it is misplaced. All the other items in the application are positives that we've added. In the original 2 site plans, there was no landscaping on anywhere on the west side. So now we've added that. We have gone over this in great detail with the planning department, with the administrator, our planner. Every detail has been considered. We're aware of the headaches that we have on this property. I don't see how the canopy and pump placement have any effect on the neighbor at all. There is 12 to 18 feet between that western property line and their property line. Here's the other thing. We met with the engineering department. We have in writing this approval, which was circulated to the planning department, that they will only approve this particular configuration. That's in writing. So the width is the width. It really has no effect on us. Our neighbor needs that space. We have no need for the alley, except partially for ingress and egress. But if we didn't have the curb cut that we have, we could still make it work. But that curb cut that you see and where the alley is approved by traffic engineering in writing. I think those are the highlights I want to cover. Again, many months of collaborative, coordinated effort with DPD to come up with this plan. Every minute detail has been covered, and that's why we're here today, is to legitimize the setback shortfall on the pump and the canopy, and to add the additional landscaping and some of the other improvements. Mr. Chairman, at this point, I want to introduce my colleague, Dedrick Ridnum.
Good afternoon.
Hey.
My name is Dedrick Bridnam. My address is 3385 Airways Boulevard, Suite 229.
All right. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak on this case. I just want to make a couple of comments. If you turn to page 4 and page 5, let's turn to page 4 of the staff report, please.
What are you looking for?
Page 4 of the staff report, please.
What's on page 4?
It's the plat.
Oh, it's not in this presentation, but the board members have a copy of it.
Yeah, we all have a copy.
Okay, you have it, okay.
Yeah.
Well, if you'll see on page 4, the subject site is highlighted in yellow, and this is a very old plat, as you can see, and the area to the west is the so-called alley. Over the years, this alleyway has become sort of a no man's land. There's not really any current record or modern record of where the alley sits. And if you take a look at the next page, 5 of the staff report, immediately to the west of the subject site, it's vacant. And if you look at the existing zoning on page 5, it says gateway commercial. The site to the west is also gateway commercial. It is not residential. And what the board is considering is what is currently out there. We have a case that was approved 2 previous times, once in 2019, once in 2021, and we're back here again to make sure that this site complies with the UDC and any variances that are associated with the approval of the Board of Adjustment. So we ask that you consider what's existing now when you make your decision and not what may be coming down the road in the future. So this is gateway commercial, and as Mr. Davis said in his opening remarks, this site, this gas station, convenience store is allowed in gateway commercial. And I think I have just a couple more comments, and that'll be it. It's not unusual. It's not unusual if you go back to the site plan, the one that everyone's reviewed, and you see it's not unusual to have some type of landscaping in a public right-of-way. As I said earlier, that's a no man's land. There's not really any demarcation of where that alley is. And that landscaping, even if it's in a public right-of-way, it's not unusual to have public right-of-way, and my client is willing to bear the cost of that landscaping. And finally, once this store is open, it will produce approximately $185,000 in sales tax to the city of Memphis and about $60,000 in city and county property taxes. So with that said, we ask that you approve this case with the conditions as stated by Mr. Davis, and my client has completely agreed to all the conditions. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ms. Baker.
Mr. Davis, when I look at the site plan, I'm assuming that this applicant will be building that alley, dedicating since you don't know how much is out there, and improving it. Is that correct? For the whole length of that site?
So yes, it is definitely a confusing situation. The width of the alley, we believe it is a 12.5-foot right-of-way with no man's land between the right-of-way and the convenience store site. So it's not theirs in their deed to dedicate, but we are comfortable incorporating it into the site plan as shown here. So just to be clear again, this arrow shows that 12.5-foot width that goes from Virginia to Crump. Currently in this site plan, as approved by city engineering, traffic engineering, a one-way alley, but with an entrance from Crump. And that no man's land would be landscaped or open as shown on this plan. It would be required if the site plan were approved for the developer, for the applicant to improve the entire length of the alley to the end of their property line, but not all the way to Virginia. There would be no dedication required.
And he would have to improve the whole 12.5 feet or whatever it is. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Baker, we agree to that condition.
Thank you.
I got another question for staff, I think. One, I'm looking at in the staff report under the fire division, and detailed plans review will be conducted. So they fire still has to take a look at this as well. Is that in the conditions? Maybe.
It's not a condition, but it could certainly be added as a condition, but either way, it is a requirement, and you can't grant variances from the fire code.
Yeah, which I don't intend to do. And then another question. Anyways, I have another question. I just have to remember what it was. Does anybody else have any questions for staff or the applicant?
Well, I'm just going to go on and ask the applicant, do you know that this billboard on the site has to be removed And you're willing to do that?
Yes, it's in this proverbial no man's land, and you can certainly condition it. We'll be happy to remove it.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks.
I know what my question was. Could you give the idea behind the one-way alley? Why it has to be one way as opposed to a two-way alley like a normal alley would be?
Sure. Yeah, this is something that a lot of conversation and thought has gone into. A two-way alley would require greater width.
Sure.
And ultimately, it was just simpler to keep it as it's currently dedicated at the 12 and a half feet, without requiring dedication from either side. There's also issues of property ownership to the north, and where potential dedication north of this gas station site would come from Virginia.
Are most alleys, like, I'm thinking of just the ones I've been down in Midtown, are they two-way? I mean, they're thin, but like they don't really have any signage on them to tell me I can't go one way or the other.
Many of them that are thin are one way and have those signs. They're not all signed perfectly, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. I guess we need to discuss, so if we could get a motion to approve BOA 2023-0070 as conditioned by staff.
So moved.
Second.
All right, is there any discussion? Ms. Baker?
Well, at some point, I would like to add a condition regarding removal of the existing billboard. And it probably wouldn't hurt to have a condition in there as well, I think, to make sure that it's clear to everybody that the applicant is improving the entire width of the alley from one side of his property to the other. So that would be two conditions that I would like to add.
Is there any discussion on those proposed conditions?
I have a second one again, I'm sorry. I know the removal of the billboard, and then what was the other one was that he would entire width of the alley.
Yeah. Can we make sure we're speaking?
Yeah, can you speak?
I was going to mention too,
Yeah,
there
that's
is,
okay.
the acoustics in here have been a little bit difficult, so we want to make sure that we're getting everything on record so we can make sure our minutes are correct.
So how about this?
You're asking for language? Oh.
Yeah, so condition 8 would be the existing billboard in the public alley or no man's land shall be removed. And condition 9 being that applicant will improve the entire width of the alley, the north-south length of the subject property.
Yeah, and I do just want to make a comment. Mr. Little just signified to me that he believes the junior billboard is on his property. So it's not clear based on site planning documents where it is. I had assumed it was within the right of way, but if you want to.
I didn't hear what you said was on his property. I missed that one.
The junior billboard.
The junior billboard, okay.
But even if it's in the no man's land and they're improving that, it'll still have to go. And is that correct?
It could, but Mr. Little just indicated he believes it's on his property.
Oh, on his property.
And
Dispute as to whether it's on the no man's land or on Mr. Little's.
So could we change our condition to, in the event the junior billboard is located on the subject property or the adjacent alley, the applicant will remove same?
Sure.
Yeah. Any other thoughts in general or about other conditions on this?
Point point of clarity, when we're saying improving, are we improving according to the site plan? Because I know they were saying something abuts the other property, so we're just approving up until.
Just what's in the alley.
Okay.
Yeah, we wouldn't have any control over the other property.
Okay.
So that, I think that Mr. Davis said the green at the top was just an idea.
Gotcha,
That's
okay.
not to be determined later, you know, when that other building
Okay.
is approved. Any other thoughts? You know, it's not perfect, but pretty good.
Well, I'm comfortable with having known that city engineer, and I know fire staff to give their points, but the other departments have kind of vetted it to its use and the placement. So I think I'm kind of comfortable with the new
Yeah.
site plan.
And wanted to point out as well, condition number 7, that anything not modified by this, as far as those conditions, which I think were the landscape buffers and stuff like that, they are, even though they're not shown on that's still there, correct? The berm, the bike area. Of course, the bike, I guess, is part of this one as well.
Yes.
A berm is not strictly required by the UDC. I mean, the landscaping is, but it's not required by us to be bermed as conditioned, just FYI.
Okay. Would anybody want to add such a berm condition?
I think that he would.
Yeah.
Can you get a berm in 15 feet? That would be my only question.
It's usually a 3/1 rise, so you could get a small berm.
Well, I guess we could add it and do the best they can with it.
Could you explain to me where that proposed berm was so we can have a condition for that?
So, sure. And I spoke with the opposition speaker over the phone who mentioned it. I don't see a berm actually on this 2021 approval. I don't believe it was required as part of this approved site plan. It certainly could be added, but it would go, so it's not, the landscaping, specific landscaping proposal isn't shown here, but there's 2 landscape areas that bookend the sidewalk. So it would go on this wider side, inside of the sidewalk, presumably.
And just on Crump? Or on Crump and Florida?
It could be required on either side. So we have a 15-foot minimum from the curb of the right-of-way to the end of the landscaping. In most cases, this site exceeds that 15-foot minimum, although it is certainly narrower along the Florida side than the Crump side.
Go ahead, yeah.
What are the sign regulations in Gateway?
Great question. The UDC does not regulate signage. Signage in this district is regulated by the DMC, the Downtown Memphis Commission, and all signage has to be approved through their process.
Okay.
Although one of our conditions does prohibit signage on the canopy itself.
That what?
One of the recommended conditions does prohibit signage on the canopy itself.
And when you say that, I mean, I would think that would mean no lettering on that. A shell emblem, is that considered a sign?
That would be considered a sign.
Okay,
So
so it
these
just
shell
would be the
signs,
painted-
including the one facing the alley right-of-way, would need to be removed. And this sign has already been installed, this detached sign here. So it's smaller than your average Memphis gas station sign.
So are we adding a condition about the berm?
I was about to ask you that. That was my question as well.
Well, the applicant said that they don't mind putting the berm up. The neighbors want it, so I don't see why we wouldn't.
Yeah.
How would we state it, without it being, berm shall be installed along landscaping along Crump in Florida, I mean, as allowed by space? I mean, like, I don't know how to define that berm very well.
Yeah,
The only thing that we're struggling with a little bit is whether or not you can get up to a berm and back down, in 15 feet.
Yeah.
And I guess we can, it just couldn't go as high.
Right, yeah.
erosion.
Let me think. How about, I think this would be condition 10. The largest berm allowed shall be installed on the southern and eastern lines in the what would that be? The landscape area between the sidewalk and the parking lot? Does that make sense?
About the largest berm
As shown
feasible.
on the, site plan?
Mr. Bruce was,
Yeah, the largest berm feasible as
I'll take
opposed to
that.
allowed.
That sounds even better.
Yeah.
okay.
Any other discussion? And I assume you're ready to vote on BOA 2023-70 as conditioned by staff with our 3 additional conditions. Go ahead. Yeah, if you'll do a roll call, please.
Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Skurlock?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
All right. Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Yes, I find that the standards of the UDC of 9.22.6 are being met. It will not be unduly detrimental to the properties in the vicinity.
Chair Rainey?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, it's been approved. We wish all the parties the best of luck in the area. Mr. Rags, will we call our next case, please?
Thank you very much.
Item number 14, BOA 2023-101, 3480 Plaza Avenue.
All right, is the applicant present? No, I have one opposition card. The applicant will come forward, and if the opposition wants to move down as well, they can. Mr. Davis, looks like you're up again. You're the man of the hour, or 2.
Was that item 14?
That's item 14, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
All right, ready for me?
Yes, sir.
All right, again, Brett Davis with DPD. This is the last case of the afternoon, BOA 2023-0101. This is a use variance request for 3480 Plaza Avenue, which is an address within Poplar Plaza, Poplar and Island, northwest corner. The owner of that shopping center is Poplar Realty, and that group, that partnership is also the applicant today, represented by Mr. Whitehead. The requested use is for a potential tenant that is hoping to open up a blood plasma donation center storefront. The total shopping center area is 28 acres, and this site is within 2 zoning districts, commercial mixed use 1, and residential single-family 6. It's within our fairly new overlay district, the Transit Overlay District, which does change use regulations for certain uses, but has nothing to say about this particular use. And I'll get back to the zoning in just a second. So this is in central Memphis. Here's that zoning map. Now, this red line here is a boundary between CMU 1 to the west and south, which contains all of the buildings in the shopping center, and single-family residential 6 to the east. So this parking along Highland is actually in a single-family zoning district. It was approved to be built out as parking by the Board of Adjustment through the use variance process in the 1950s. Now that use variance process doesn't allow blood plasma donation centers, so we would consider this use variance to apply to the CMU1 and the R6 zoning districts. CMU2 and CMU3 allow blood plasma donation centers by conditional use permit, which is a Board of Adjustment approval that has its own set of criteria that are not the same as the variance criteria, but it's more akin to the special use permit process, but a little quicker, and it goes to the Board of Adjustment rather than the legislative bodies. But CMU1, that is not an option. So this has been filed as a use variance request, which means that the 7 use variance criteria need to be met, including that the site can't be used for anything it's currently zoned for. Here is a land use map. Red is for commercial, and yellow, single-family residential. Here is a photograph of the subject bays. Both sides of this building are requested to be included in this use variance. It's just over 150 feet wide, and the commercial space shown here comprises 11,500 square feet. The southern part of the building on the left side of the photograph is vacant and has been vacant for a few years now. And the right side was also vacant for some time, not quite as long, and is currently serving as the temporary campaign headquarters for Paul Young. Permanent campaign headquarters, but the campaign will come to an end. So presumably would become vacant again. Here's just a view down Highland. And this is just highlighting those subject bays. If approved, it would allow blood plasma donation center only in that space, but nowhere else in the shopping center. So we were convinced by the length of vacancy of these spaces that perhaps there is difficulty in finding any by right user here, and we are recommending approval with 3 conditions. So requiring that all patients be seen by appointment, not to allow this use anywhere else in the shopping center, and we also have a limitation on the hours of operation seen there in condition 3. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Questions from Mr. Davis or other staff? All right, if the applicant will come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Miloš Migic, Birch Porter Johnson, 130 North Court Avenue.
All right, you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I'm joined here by my colleague, Josh Whitehead, and then Rick Smith of Fernard Properties as well. We don't want to spend too much time here since we do have some opposition. We agree with the findings of Mr. Davis. We accept the conditions, and we're just going to wait for the rebuttal.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else here to speak in favor? All right, then we'll move to the opposition. So Mr. Cockcroft, to give your name and address for the record, sir.
My name is Don Cockcroft. I live at 7712 River Bend Drive.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead and share it with us, sir.
I own the property directly across the street from the plasma center they're proposing to put in here at 80 South Highland. I've had that property now for going on about 6 years. I've had a lot of opportunity to improve this property. I use it now as it's a residential rental property I use for my own investment. I personally went in there and rehabbed this house, and I put a lot of pride in making sure this property is taken care of, and it's in really good condition. And over the years, I've watched Poplar Plaza struggle. It is a struggling center over there. I've noticed some of the tenants come and go. But one of my main concerns is my house that I frequent. I'm over there probably once a week or so, every other week anyways. And I spend a lot of time, I actually communicate and speak with the locals who are, they seem to be moving up and down the sidewalk pretty frequently. There's a bus stop, there's a stop located right to the north side of my house. So I spend a lot of time out there, going out there and trying to keep the place clean, which is a very difficult task. We've got some panhandlers up on the corner. We're actually very friendly, but they seem to be gaining in popularity because there seems to be no incentive to move anybody out. I'm very concerned about this plasma center attracting a little bit of a negative impact to the community. I'm afraid of what's going to happen. I'm staring at this directly across the street, and I've watched this center actually struggle, and I know they're having a problem with keeping some tenants in there, and I'd love to see some other tenants come and stay. And I understand the economic conditions have not been favorable here the last 4 or 5 years for that center. But what I don't want to see is a move in a direction that is going to negatively impact the residential community around this center. This center is a very popular East Memphis location that, now I'm a Memphian, grew up in Memphis since 1970, and went to school in Memphis. I frequented Poplar Plaza as a kid growing up, and I'm watching some things happen over here that they're really distressing me. And when I got this notice that they're going to put a plasma center, now there's a plasma center on Walker Avenue, is there not? Within walking distance. There's a plasma center right down on Summer Avenue. Why do we need one here in Eastgate Shopping Center? I mean, in Poplar Plaza. I don't understand it. I understand it's just they want to fill the space. I get that. I'm in real estate. I'm a real estate broker. I'm familiar with the idea of you got to get the best use out of the property that you own, but at what cost is what my real concern is, because I don't see a real positive impact of this type of business going into this great East Memphis location. I would just like to see something else happen here. I'm totally against what may occur. And I understand they put up some language here. It has to be by appointment only, no walk-ins. And I've tried to do some research and some background of what plasma donation centers really do, and there's really no statistics out there to say whether or not it's going to be negatively affecting, but I'm almost assured that the people that are actually frequenting this location are not those that are on the higher end of economics. Most people are in there donating their plasma for reasons of trying to make ends meet, and I get that, and I don't want to take that opportunity away from people, but I think there should be other locations that would better serve this type of establishment. And I appreciate you letting me voice my opinion on this.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. Cockcroft?
Yeah, excuse my ignorance, but, just help me understand how the people who will be visiting a blood plasma center different from, consumers going to any other business. Just excuse the question. I'm just trying to follow you.
Well, I think, and like I mentioned before, and I tried to do some reading and some research on it, and it does come, I feel, this is my opinion now, somebody who's going to, it's not like you're going over here to the blood bank to donate your blood for, altruistic reasons. People are going there to sell their plasma for an economic boost in whatever they're looking for whatever reason. And it's usually people that may be using those funds. And I'm just speaking, I have no statistical data on this. I'm just speaking from my heart here, what I think is really going on. And I think it's mostly people who are in desperate need for whatever reason to pick up a boost in an economic way. And I think it's going to attract a certain element of the population that may be doing it just for that financial reason for, I don't want to be, I don't want to try to have an opinion about what they're going to use the money for, but I think there is some data out there that I'm probably not aware of that would show that the people that are actually coming in for whatever money they get paid, I don't know how much they get paid. I was at the University of Memphis a long time ago, and I remember the donation center, and I remember I saw a lot of people hanging around that place because they needed that money it wasn't for their tuition or books, I'm going to tell you that right now. It was for other reasons, for recreational, whatever they were going to do, because they were strapped for the cash. And I'm afraid it's going to attract a certain element right here in the heart of East Memphis that I don't think we need to be headed in this direction. Like I said, I take a lot of pride in my property. I go out there and clean the street in front of my house on either side, trying to keep the trash down. And although I've never had a negative experience from a lot of the unhoused, homeless that walk up and down the street, most of them are very friendly. But I guarantee you, they're going to be over there knocking on that door trying to pick up an extra few bucks for a reason that I don't think is going to be a positive one. And I appreciate that question. Thank you. I wish I had more real strong facts. I just don't.
Yeah, no, thank you. That helps.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Is there anybody else here in opposition? All right, then we will move back to the applicant for some rebuttal of those thoughts or answers to questions.
Yes, I'm also a University of Memphis graduate, 2018. I served 8 years in the Marine Corps, had the GI Bill, had a part-time job. It was not enough for me to survive. And I actually, in fact, donated plasma and white blood cells. Did I use that money to be able to pay my car and my insurance and gas? Yes, I did. Was I also proud that these things were helping other people? Yes, I think two things can be true at the same time. I do get compensated for it, but I also use it for things that I need. As far as reading and research, I did a lot of that too. Some really interesting facts. This is straight from the United States Department of Health and Human Services in regards to plasma donations. 130 plasma donations will treat exactly one person with primary immunodeficiency for 1 year. That affects about 500,000 people in the United States. These are pretty rare conditions. It's not something, wasn't like COVID where we could just make a vaccine or we had a lot of different things affecting a lot of people. This affects small percentages of people. 465 plasma donations will treat someone with chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy treatment for 1 year. 465 to treat one person to keep them alive. Some of those things that CIDP does, it's a neurological disorder. You get progressively weaker, reduced senses in the arms and the legs, caused by damage to the fat-based protective covering on the nerves, the myelin sheath. That gives you tingling, no feelings in your fingers and toes, weakness of arms and legs, fatigue, tiredness, and usual feelings in the body. 900 donations will treat exactly one person with alpha-1 antitrypsin deficiency for 1 year. These people suffer from shortness of breath and wheezing, repeated lung infections, tiredness, rapid heartbeat upon standing, vision problems, and unexpected weight loss. 1,200 plasma donations will treat exactly one person with hemophilia for 1 year. Bleeding within joints that can lead to chronic joint pain and disease, bleeding in the head, sometimes in the brain. These can lead to long-term problems such as seizures and paralysis. If this doesn't get stopped, vital organs such as the brain, for hemophiliac, that's death. The United States supplies 70% of the world's plasma. There is a gentleman by the name of Peter Jaworski. He's employed by Georgetown. He's a professor there. And his primary research is on the ethics and economics of blood plasma collection and patient therapies made from plasma. And he is quoted as saying, "There is no country in the world that is self-sufficient in plasma for plasma therapies unless it pays its donors." And that's just kind of the sad truth. If it's not paid for, there's not going to be enough. So 500,000 Americans need plasma every year. And there's a lot of students at the University of Memphis that I went to school with that did not have the GI Bill, that worked full-time, and they still didn't have enough for books. So this is a little personal to me, but if that doesn't answer some of those questions, Rick Smith, do you have anything to add? Yes.
You'll say your name and address for the record.
Rick Smith, 3460 Plaza Avenue.
Okay. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I want to thank y'all for allowing us to come here today and giving of your time. I would also like to thank the gentleman for being a neighbor that cares enough to come talk about what's going on around him. I know that doesn't necessarily always two-step together, but people who care is really what we need around the shopping center. I would like to point out that we have owned the shopping center since 1986. So we're over 35 years and going. It's a long-term hold, and we do work very hard to make good decisions to carry that forward. And we work very hard to resist those things, as the gentleman said, that might turn the shopping center a different direction. To that end, we spent almost 90 days researching blood plasma and the information that's out there about it before we even wanted to bring it to y'all. We needed to be comfortable with making the step that it was a good, legitimate, beneficial use for the shopping center and for the patrons who come there. It was very important for us with this company to have appointments only, very strictly, no outside lines. I'm certainly not saying that we can prevent people from knocking on a door, but that is extremely important to us as well. He mentioned the other locations. I am not as familiar with them, but this is a first-class national plasma center. The build-out is very doctor's office, hospital-like, and it is done in that realm in a tremendously professional fashion. And we believe that it attracts a wide variety of people, notwithstanding that some people do struggle with the payment that is there, but that payment does not isolate to any particular group of people as a target or individually in terms of that. And the last comment I would like to make, we work hard with our security company and MPD in the city to try to deter panhandling to the extent that we can. One of the best ways that we can deter that is to decrease our vacancy and have occupancy and activity so that those panhandlers don't have a place to hang out. And this does come into that overall plan. Thank you again very much.
All right. Are there any questions for Mr. Smith? Okay, go ahead.
You did mention that this, the company, is it a national brand that will be occupying the space? You know, there are several different plasma donation companies. So is this a national?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and is this the first one here in Memphis, or will there be others?
It is the first one in Memphis, yes. I cannot speak to their plan for other locations.
Okay.
Any other questions of the applicant? All right, do you want to go ahead and ask it? Yeah.
Mr. Davis, what is the hardship associated with this application, supporting the use variance?
Well, I'll let the applicant and their representation speak to that. They highlighted 2 points. One was the extended vacancy of the site, and the other was its location to the rear of the sort of center of gravity of the shopping center, anchored by Kroger and maybe some dumpsters that are being used by K&G. But I'll let the applicant make that case themselves.
You are familiar with, as you are driving north on Highland, the K&G Fashion in the back, kind of where the left side of our highlighted bay in yellow, there is the UDC 4.6.8. They have, it's essentially bushes and green space that blocks the back of that. So as you were going north on Highland, you can't really see the old Tuesday Morning that was there, and then Xfinity, and so you're pretty much right there on the left. The other part of it is when this building was made in the 1940s and 50s, That was actually going to be the back of the building, and everything was going to face west into that main parking lot with Kroger. So even if they wanted to do some sort of retail conglomeration, there's really nowhere for trucks to come in to drop stuff off. If they wanted to somehow put a loading bay in on the side, that right-of-way in between the Dollar Tree, CC's, it wouldn't allow anybody to be able to back in for any sort of dropping off of goods for retail and things like that.
Other questions? I know that, like, we probably don't have anything on this. Is there any sort of, it's not allowed in this area for a reason, I assume. Do we know why? Like, what is the, when a law's passed, often, there'll be a legislative history. I don't know about that, about zoning, as far as there being comments on this is why this is done a certain way. Would the applicant like to speak to that?
Mr. Chairman, Josh Whitehead, Birch Porter Johnson. You need to swear me.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
This is not a great answer, but it is the answer. When the Blood Plasma Donation Center opened on Summer Avenue, somewhere between Waring, I guess, and Perkins, or Graham and Waring, there was an outcry to some degree by members of one of our two legislative bodies. And so to address that response, the zoning ordinance was amended to restrict this use in this zoning district. So it was a response to a particular opening.
There's a stigma against plasma centers, and that shows it. Do y'all have any data on that being just a stigma, or is there anything to back it up? Are they run differently than they used to be? How do they get their clients? That kind of stuff?
Through our research, I think there's a distinction between blood plasma donation centers and blood banks. We're the former and not the latter. I think by accepting appointments only, A, and B, we keep, our prospective tenant keeps a roster of who you are. We get an address, so those who are homeless are really not able to participate in our program because you have to have an address. And then we keep a record of when you come in and when you can make, if there is a next appointment, the next appointment. So I think in our research, what we've discovered is if there is a stigma, it's probably due to the blood banks of the world that accept walk-in customers with very little record keeping.
Quick question on that note. In the research, did they describe how they controlled? Because it's one thing to know I have an appointment and it does require an address, but if I'm an average person just kind of walking by or looking, I may just walk up anyway. So how do we control that flow of the unknown?
That's going to be more specifically to that specific tenant. But at that point, my assumption is if the condition of walk-ins only, if somebody walked in, they'd just be educated on that, hey, this isn't a walk-in facility, maybe a sign posted somewhere in there for that. With some of the stigmas that just reading some of the comments and then just researching this stuff, a lot of the stigma comes down to they believe that there's no regulation. It's heavily regulated by the FDA and OSHA. It's so heavily regulated, in fact, that the way that someone enters in and they walk around the facility is regulated. And that's not up to our clients. That's really up to the FDA and OSHA. And so with having that in the back of my head, I'm pretty comfortable knowing that if someone did walk in off the street and was like, hey, I'd like to donate plasma today, they would be educated on the proper way to do that and then kind of get put into the queue and learn how the entire process actually works.
Do you know the term of the lease?
We do not know the exact term at this time. What has been discussed is a 10-year initial term with multiple options, but we just reached a point in discussion where we wanted to come before this board before we advance those conversations any further. I would suspect that they would want a minimum of 30 years. That is what I'm suspecting. There's considerable investment, regardless of the use, by both the owner and the tenant here that together will be well over 7 figures. So any type of short-term lease is just really it's just a showstopper in terms of this going forward.
Go ahead.
Or this is for the question for the applicant. You could put up there in big letters, Plasma Donation Center on the building, but you're not going to do that, are you?
In our initial conditions that we recommended, we are okay with whatever the signage being regulated. That doesn't bother us. I'm pretty sure there's the permit process that you have to go through that has X amount of feet and things of that nature. And so I don't think the sign would be an issue. And if that was something that wanted to be conditioned, I'm sure Mr. Smith would be okay with.
Mr. Davis, you might have to help us with coming up with a good sign condition.
So
I mean, if the other board members are interested.
Sure. As it stands, a detached sign would not be permitted. It's in the residential zoning district, of course, and they would be allowed one attached sign subject to no size limit along Highland. We don't regulate the area of attached wall signs in the CMU district. So if you did want to put an aerial limit on that sign, potentially 50 to 100 square feet could be appropriate.
Anybody else have an opinion on what a good sign size would be?
Is our attempt to kind of downplay?
Well, that's what I think because of the concerns of the neighbors. And I think this site is a little different because there is residential on the other side of the street, and the other locations may not have that. And so that's why we have a neighbor down here. And so I think just the not having a big advertising sign on the front of the building might at least take away some of those concerns. And I really, right off the top of my head, don't know what the best size would be. As small as possible is all I can say.
I think it also matters what it says.
That's
true.
If the name of it was like Williams Services, I'm not as concerned as Davis Plasma Donation Center.
Yeah.
One condition that we see or restriction we see in a residential zoning district, for example, for signage is that it's limited to the name of the business only. So you couldn't have, the name of the business and then call so-and-so number to make an appointment with a condition that restricted it to the name of the establishment only. And that in combination with a size requirement, potentially in the upper 2 digits, might get a pretty small and appropriate sign for the site.
I would just like to make a couple of comments both to Ms. Baker and Mr. Rainey, and I thought you were going here. I would welcome anything that might be walk-up attractive, any type of thing that would go against what we're saying, but I beg your understanding, signage to any tenant in the shopping center, whether it be Rosie's Nails or Kroger, is huge in a discussion. So none of us like to define the word reasonable, but if we take a tenant like this and give them a sign that is not identifiable to their business use, that will be a big struggle. But again, I stress anything that lends itself to deterring going there other than by the appointment, certainly welcome. Thank you.
And let me ask you a question, Mr. Smith.
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming that we don't, are we allowed to know the name of the company?
I'm processing that real time.
Yeah.
They were willing to be here and couldn't.
Uh-huh.
The name of the company is BioLife.
Okay.
And you may have just got me in trouble with them. I don't know. But they were willing to be here, so I feel comfortable enough.
I mean, do you think they have a problem with the fact that the sign is only allowed to say BioLife?
I think they would, Mr. Rainey. Now, I'm not going to stand up here and speak for these people, but I've been in real estate on the commercial side for well over 20 years, and when you start messing with people's logo and signage, they get upset.
And Mr. Chairman, I'll add, we really can't regulate content of signage legally, so we would just have to be careful with that.
So I couldn't say, you can't say the word center. You're saying I'm not allowed to do that.
Correct.
And our attorney, I'm just kidding. I trust you on that. Okay.
Mr. Simmons could.
I think that's a concern of mine is kind of infringing on their logo, their trademark, because that's gonna, if they have an existing or a demographic that they're used to reaching out to, their logo is going to reach that type of clientele and demographic. So, I mean, size-wise, maybe, we're looking at the building and all of that, but the content, I don't, well, there's one. It doesn't say all of that, or if it says it enough that it doesn't.
It says it underneath. You can barely see little white letters. It says BioLife Plasma Services or Center.
So, yeah, that to me, but I can't, for my fellow, but that would suffice to me according to the building size. Do we want a neon and put it in?
I'd just like to comment that Mr. Rainey asked me to say the name. He didn't tell me he was going to put a picture up.
I didn't put the picture up.
Oh, okay. meant as comic relief.
Right.
Again, I will, I think Ms. Baker brought it up first. The signage does not need to be inviting to passerbys. It needs to be an advertisement to locate the business for those people who are looking for it.
Correct.
And this is a site in Cordova and the attached sign that they currently have as of this year.
That is public.
Mr. Davis, do you have any guess about what the size of that sign would be? 35 square feet, 50 square feet?
Larger than 35 square feet. What do you think, Chris?
Gotta be
about 50 is a good guess.
I'm gonna add a
6 by. Okay, any other questions? All right. What we need to do is get a motion to approve BOA 2023-101 as conditioned by staff.
So moved.
second.
Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Ms.
Mr.
Baker.
Chairman, I would like to add a condition, and I'm sorry, I don't have the staff report in front of me, so I don't know what number it would be. But my proposed condition would limit the size of the attached sign to 50 square feet. That should be a small enough sign that the neighbors on the other side of Highland probably won't even be able to see it.
I can't necessarily agree with that because we're dealing with a different size building. And so you want it to be, I mean, recognizable to its patron and not limited to the size of what we just saw on another building. Should it take up the entire building length or size? No, but I don't think limited it to 50 feet is fair to the applicant.
Other thoughts?
Does sign approval have to come back at some point, or no?
Look at these pictures.
Are we in discussion?
We are in discussion, yeah.
Okay, well, what I would really like to do on this, because I heard what Mr. Whitehead said about how this restriction got in CMU1 and so on. But at the same time, I get what the neighbor is saying. I just do. And so what I really like to do in an instance like this is to put a time limit on our approval so that if it does turn out the way the neighbor is afraid of, then, you know, it won't be extended at the end of the time limit. But if it doesn't, then the time limit will be over. But I've heard what you said about the amount of investment and so on, and so you're not willing to accept that. But I'm struggling with this because I can really, I kind of hate to put extra requirements on a business that is allowed in most commercial districts, but in a way, this is a kind of a different located commercial district because it has residential across the street. And so anyway, those are my thoughts about it.
And I do want to just actually, I just thought of this. We incorporated sign standards into the transit overlay district. And I wanted to double check that it applied to this site. So the sign standards apply to all land, even if the other standards of the site would only apply to new development. The other standards of the overlay would only apply to new development. And what these requirements say, it's a change to probably most signage in the center. So it's requiring high quality materials, prohibiting plastic signage, limiting text to the name of the establishment only, and prohibiting pole signs. So that is in the transit overlay district, which fills in the gap. It was created to fill in the gap along the bus rapid transit route between the Midtown District and the University District. And some of these sign standards were pulled from the University District, and others were written new for this district. So, and I just realized that, so excuse me. But there's no limit on area here.
Talks about scale to fit their context. It's the closest to it, but that's not really helpful.
Yeah, the problem with that, this is just what I think about it, is it's a big building. I mean, you know, it could have a sign that I could see when I was going to Kroger, you know, before I turned in the curb cut. So to not be able to have some comfort to limit that, and once again, you know, it is a little different here with homes across the street, and they're homes that face Highland there. It's not just behind the gates and everything.
This was,
so.
Before, was this the Tuesday morning store?
Tuesday morning. And Comcast at the corner.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So both of them had their commercial logos on those buildings, and we didn't have those complaints before, so this. Okay.
Well, let me just put a thought out there to kind of counter some of this. I know there are residential areas around, but this property is kind of in the middle of the shopping center. It's not on the edge. It's not on the outside. It's right across the street from residences.
It's on the Highland Street edge.
but
there's a nice big buffer
yeah,
between.
Yeah, there's a huge buffer between where the building is located and the street and any residences. I mean, I know you can see it from the street.
We're not,
Open discussion.
we're in discussion. The audience is not involved in this anymore. Go ahead, Mr. Bruce.
Yeah, no, that's it. I'm just pointing it out as not that I see it one way or another. I just wanted to inject that into the conversation.
It's not right up on the street. It's not right up on the street.
That's right.
Mr. Davis, could you kind of estimate for us how far you think the facade is from Highland?
Yeah, so that's probably around 300 feet, a little less than 300 feet.
Okay.
My best guess. From the sidewalk.
I think I'd be willing to put a size on it, but I think because of the size of the building, that maybe the 50 feet is too small. I'd be more like 75 feet. It seems, back off the road. But again, it's not the full facade of that building. It's, I'm looking at the picture that we had, and I'm making this up, trying to figure it out. Like looking at Paul Young's sign, I can very easily see that sign. Like I've driven by it, I've seen it. I think that one, if I had to just guess, I think that sign is about 60-something square feet. I think it's supposed to be in like a 4 by, or a 5 by 12. I was just kind of drawing little things, trying to guess how wide that door was and stuff like that. And so getting a sign that's, 6 by 12, I mean, that's pretty visible, I think. And that gets it to 72 feet.
Yep.
How do we know how big the K&G, that centered sign is?
That's what I was trying to find.
That's about probably the width and height.
Yeah.
I would think that would be, it's not spreading from light to light, but it'd be as centered, I guess you would say. It would be enough, but it's not overbearing and taking over the whole lineal of the side of the building.
Right.
I would say no larger than.
I've tried to do some estimates in the little, if I had to guess again, the little squares that are kind of on those facades look to be close to 4x4s.
Okay.
It's what I was kind of, based on the height of the door and stuff like that. That's what it seemed like to me.
And excuse me, I overestimated, so it's about 186 feet from the building to the right-of-way.
Oh, good.
From the building to the street, to the...
Yeah. To the sidewalk. Yes,
to the sidewalk.
Look, and that helps too, that building height is 28 feet.
Okay.
Or 29 feet. How tall that building is.
Okay.
So, looks like it's roughly cut in half. A little bit more on top than on the bottom. But I would guess that facade is 15 feet. So maybe those squares are 5-foot squares roughly.
Okay, so.
Just to.
10, 15 by.
Those are 5-foot squares. Yeah, I think 50 square feet would be pretty small. And I could be wrong. I'm guessing on some of these, and maybe it's.
I wish we knew the
It
size.
looks like 3 squares take up the width of a parking lot.
Yeah, they're probably 4 feet. Yeah.
That little space available sounded just a hair bigger than the Paul Young.
Yeah.
And you can't see that. So, whatever. I wish I knew the K&G sign. I'd be fine. The square footage.
Can we have the sign question come back to us?
I mean, if you want to do that, you just have to hold it and get more information from that prospective tenant. They're not going to sign a lease without knowing. If you give them something like, hey, we'll take this, but hey, come back and ask for something else. If that doesn't work, maybe would be your option.
So the 75-foot 72, 75-foot suggestion, we don't think that's, I mean, that sounded reasonable to me from what little I know.
I'll agree to that.
If you're looking for it, I think you'd be able to find it.
Yeah. I can bend on that. I think I can.
75 feet, that gives you about what?
6 by 8.
Yeah. 6 by 12, roughly.
I would like to know this. I don't.
And here's the thing, I know I'm just talking, Mr. Chairman, but everybody's coming here by appointment. So, we, you know, it really is not needed to attract people in there. You know, if they're coming by appointment, they pretty much know where it is.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, it can also, I mean, you can call by appointment, but you still need to have a kind of a landmark.
On your first time, but we're not trying to necessarily advertise for just every single person going down the road to be like, oh yeah. This isn't a billboard, you know, trying to get.
This is also a question. We said by appointments only. Are there walk-in appointments available? I mean,
no,
it was just strictly by call.
Yeah, no, yes, it would be.
That's a condition.
Yeah, so big enough to find if you're looking for it.
Correct.
But somebody just walking or driving down the street doesn't necessarily need to see
It's
it.
not advertising to drivers.
I'm comfortable with 75 feet, and they can always come back and
I'll go with
ask
it.
for something.
Yeah.
Yep. So that'd be condition, well, if voted on, that'd be condition 4, that the sign shall be no longer than 75 square feet.
No, the area.
Larger.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't say that.
Larger.
Any other discussion?
Come back for a modification if
Yeah.
they need to.
I mean, I think that just, can't imagine this, as far as injuriousness to the neighborhood. I mean, I've seen the ones that are, the one on Summer, it actually stays very clean. You know, it doesn't really, it's not the parade of horribles people thought it was. Heck, Cece's is probably worse.
I was gonna say,
We have some other, we have some other,
CC right down the street.
we have some other signage
And I
that,
really liked Cece's when I was in college, though.
Law school, that's how we could eat.
Any other discussion?
No.
So did we propose that
Did
condition?
propose that would be condition 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, without objection? For the
Yeah, without
condition
objection.
To 75 feet?
Okay. Yes, sir.
Yes.
5 square feet.
It's unanimous.
We get a roll call vote, please, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, sir. Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Mr. Bruce?
Yes.
Ms. Baker?
Yes.
Mr. Claybrook?
Yes.
Ms. Scurlock?
Yes.
Vice Chair Savage Towns?
Yes, up under the standards